Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May 23rd Budget and Facilities Committee meeting. With us today, for those of you watching online, is myself, Adam Smith, other committee members, Julie Epstein and Adam Block, Emily Bays, Deborah Bucks, and Ed Melkonian, and our staff for administrative liaison is Mrs. Kathy O'Hara. So we have a pretty full agenda today that we're going to jump right into. First of all, going through old business, I'm just going to give Dr. Hines a moment to talk about the budget passing, and just really want to congratulate all of the staff who worked very hard on preparing the budget that passed with a really successful majority. So I think it was 78%, and really something for everyone to be proud of. So
yeah, so thank you for that, Mr. Smith. So welcome everyone. Good morning. Yes, as Mr. Smith said, very successful, not only turnout, but certainly from a community member standpoint. 78% since I've been here. I think that's the highest since I've been here. So most notably, I want to thank certainly our business office, Ms. O'Hara, Ms. Mack, Ruth, and everybody else who was a part of this. Certainly Denise as well. As far as the district clerk, there's a lot of behind the scenes that takes place that sometimes we don't really get to share, but a lot of people working together, and we are incredibly thankful for this very child-centered, student-centered budget to move forward. And now the work begins as far as enacting it and continuing the progress we have made this year. So thank you and welcome again, everybody.
I think also Dr. Hines with Mrs. Malwani here from Parents Council, and we definitely need to, I don't know if you noticed, we should definitely give them a thank you for their support in supporting the budget.
So as always, our HSA presidents and certainly the council itself has been instrumental in getting, not only getting the word out, but making sure our community is educated. So your tireless efforts are incredibly appreciated, so thank you.
Great. So Mrs. O'Hara, would you be able to give us an update on the Sands Point property? And this is the gatehouse property we're talking about, and where we are in the sales process.
Sure. So the district put together an RFP that went out. We received 3 responses, and we have meetings set up for this week. I'm going to be interviewing the respondents and then speaking to the board about the next steps.
Great. Julie, would you have any?
I just have a question. So do we think we'll have, because we'll have to do a resolution, we'll have something before the 7th so we can approve what we need to then? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. I have on here transportation, and really it's because it's something that we've just been carrying as an old business item. And I wanted to just close the loop on earlier this, kind of at the beginning of the year. It was one of our first topics that we talked about, and we talked about, here comes the bus, and hiring the dispatcher. And just now that the budget did pass, can you just give everybody, the committee and the community just an update on kind of what we, based on now that the budget passed, what they can expect for next year?
Well, we did an RFP because we were told by the transportation company that they couldn't just increase the contracts by CPI. So the results came in last week. They were 18% higher than what was currently paid. So we only had 1 respondent, which was Peters. So I'm trying to speak to colleagues, to speak to people in Albany about what can be done, because I'm not happy with those figures. And I would like to set up a meeting with Peters to see if I can somehow negotiate something lower than that. But honestly, I'm not happy with the service. I think a lot of the community is not happy with the service. And to be quite frank, I think it's not right. I feel that we're being, we have no other options. So I want to see what kind of options we could have possibly. But other bus companies don't really want to bid on other companies' territory.
There also aren't bus companies left, right? So most companies
There's not a lot left, but like we did reach out to Dell, and we spoke to them about it, but he said, I don't have 50 buses to.
Right. That's the problem, is how's somebody going to materialize 50 buses? That's the problem.
And Pierce has gotten better since they settled this contract that they just had. which they're saying that's the reason why the big increase plus the fuel prices. So, but there has to be something. We're not the only school district, but
You had some meetings with other colleagues, I know, at other districts who use Pierce, and I guess they're in the same.
yes, East Williston and Coral Place. East Williston had a 5-year contract with Pierce, and Pierce reneged, so they're actually, and then I'm not sure what Coral Place is doing, but I'm sure they're going out for RFPs.
So Manhasset and Roslyn have their own buses. Is there something that we can look into doing with perhaps them? I don't know what the times are, so I know that there's like, I mean, I'm thinking, the way you've always been speaking is also about like cooperative type of, do you think there's an opportunity for us to look in towards something like that with school times, maybe matching, how matching? I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I'll speak with our quadrant, but the problem is the size of our district.
Yeah.
And they have enough buses to service their students, so for them to come in, usually a bus is used constantly.
Right.
Like you time it with your elementary school, your middle school, your high school, so it would be very difficult, but I will look into it.
I'm just trying to think.
Just as a crazy, out of left field idea, has anyone thought about maybe like leasing the buses from Pierce and operating them ourselves?
That's a thought I had.
Yeah.
You know, we would have to find drivers for each is for us.
Yeah.
Well, maybe even we hire his drivers, but just we manage, I don't know if that would help the problem or not, you
Yeah.
know?
So then, will he give us
all
his drivers and his
suggestions.
buses?
Well, we would hire
But
maybe the same
it's
people.
difficult.
and he
What's
runs
the
the-
difference?
Well, we manage them instead of them, and we can control, you know, the routes and the
But
schedules.
what would be in it for him? Like he'd give us
Well,
his
if he
buses
has,
and his.
otherwise he's stuck with 50 buses, he can't do anything with if we didn't have the contract with him.
We basically have
He
no
uses
choice
his
to take
buses
him.
for other things.
Got it, during the,
Right,
yeah,
yeah, have it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Unfortunately, they won't.
But I think, by the way, Mr. Smith was asking not about the transportation contract, which is very important. I think he was asking about the app.
The dispatcher.
Well, I think the contract is,
The
becomes
contract
more
is
relevant.
Well,
just
yeah, it
about
is.
buses.
Yeah.
But you didn't ask about that.
yeah,
It's kind of a conundrum.
It's- Before, I know you're gonna mention the app, but before we move off of this part of the topic, I know we were expecting an increase already, right, due to fuel prices, et cetera, and this is much higher than was expected. From your colleagues in the area that are negotiating, are they seeing the same level of increase, or they're seeing?
I haven't spoken with anyone because this just happened last
Okay.
week. I mean, I just out of frustration was like, oh my God.
No kidding.
You know, but, other districts are trying to work, because state ed doesn't want all of these new contracts coming out because they don't have a lot of people out there to approve it.
Right.
So they're trying, I was speaking with someone up at the transportation department in Albany, and they said they'd rather see schools come into an agreement with a bus company instead of going out to rebid, and they would approve those other agreements or negotiations because it's better for them to not have to approve all of these contracts.
Yes.
The 18%, what is the dollar amount on that increase?
That I haven't looked at yet. So it was just
I
like.
know it's very high,
Yeah.
I don't know the number.
You do have
Well, we're at, see, for 7 million, for 7 million is what we, I think.
7 million.
7 million is our normal, so an 18% increase from 7 million is what you're talking about, right? Yes, a little, yeah.
1 million, 1.5 million.
Just really rough, I'm just going very rough numbers here.
okay. I guess, assuming that everything stays the same and we do end up just kind of where we are, do you think that with the new dispatcher and with the app that you're gonna have access to, do you think we'll be able to?
To improve communication, yes. We also have, the new website that Shannon Bullen is working on. That's going to allow us to communicate better with the parents. We can actually push things out to the parents faster. So that's really, we think is gonna be beneficial. The Here Comes the Bus app, there's a lot of, logistics that have to be figured out with that, so.
We did approve, the board did approve, monies to implement that,
For the
correct?
board, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, for the budget.
Also, as part of this discussion, I recall at the very beginning of the year, you and Robert Allen were going through looking at really our entire transportation process and dismissal at each of the schools, especially the elementary schools. I know you were talking about creating a consistent procedure or talking about processes or policies that were gonna be implemented. I don't recall where we left it from there. Can you advise us? Thank
So
you.
I did meet with the principals, and they were sharing their best practices at the schools. So I will follow back up with them to make sure in September we have those things put in place. They were doing, like rosters basically for the buses, and people were checking to make sure the students were on the correct buses. But I think in the beginning of the year, that's really the crucial point.
Yes.
I remember you had told us, when you last reported that you had gone to all the schools, and you said that some of the schools had certain practices that other schools could benefit from, and you were gonna try to
Yeah,
make it consistent,
yeah.
and I think that was the last update you had
Right,
given us.
right, and that was, I kind of left it with the
Okay.
principals, doing it, so I know they had
Awesome.
put things together, but I'll double back.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last order of business item that we have carrying forward is, the use of facilities that we've been talking about, kind of on and off. Do you want to just give us an update on where that landed, whether or not we did end up sending an RFP, if we're gonna stick with what we have? Yeah.
Right, so I did prepare an RFP. I met with two PTA members on Friday, and I took their perspectives also. So I was going to finish it up this week and hopefully get it out, so that we will have something. I don't know if by June 7th, we're not gonna have it, but definitely by July, we should have something. So, the main focus which they had discussed was flexibility in the program, being able to do 1, 2, 3, or 4 days or 5, not being tied to, you have to go for 3 days, or, you know, the flexibility. Also, when they talked about enrichment, it wasn't just mind stimulation, it was physical creativity and also help with homework. That was one
That's
of
a
the
big one.
major focuses, because they said their students would come home and not have the work done, and now they're cooking dinner or they're doing other things. So they said, so that's really gonna be the focus of the RFP, is making sure that there is some kind of enrichment, but not like my son's gonna go to karate, your son's gonna go here. It's gonna be, I wanted to do it as 3 options for every day. That, do you wanna play a board game with one of your friends? Do you wanna do a craft after you've done your homework, you know? So I think, yeah.
I know we did a thought exchange also asking the community, do we have the feedback from that? And was the focus, I guess, any different than what you talked to these members about?
No, it was pretty similar. Trying to think it was really about the flexibility I saw. And things that were, they did talk about before care also. I think 3 or 4 people spoke about that. But this RFP is gonna focus on aftercare first, so we can get that running.
Yeah, and the other feedback was that the district's not paying for this.
Yes,
Yeah.
it'll make sure
That
it's
was a
not
major
from
piece.
the taxpayer.
What was the feedback on the district not paying for it? Were they expecting it to, or they weren't expecting it to?
They said it should not,
Yes.
that the district should not be paying
Yeah.
for it, that it should be self-sustaining. But also, I'm sorry,
Go
but
ahead, no, you go ahead.
the ladies who were helping me with this discussion, they also said that there's not a lot of options in Port Washington. That's why this is so crucial.
That's right.
Because other things, like after school, you're kind of tied to one specific or 2 different places. They did also give me a lot of different places to send the RFP to in the town, you know, instead of just 3.
So I have 2 questions. My first question is how did you come up with the two people you were speaking to? Did they just come to you or you pick them?
So when I was doing the budget presentations at the PTAs, I had people say they were interested, so,
Sounds good.
yeah, they were really terrific.
And my second question is, how are we on space at all the 5 schools that we would be looking to do this at? We do have space at all the schools to run something like
Yes,
this, and we would,
We were going to keep it like in the cafeteria is gonna be the main focus place, like where it would be. So, and also, when the RFPs come in, I've invited these two ladies to help me assess it, to look at the RFPs. We'll have a rubric and then they'll discuss it.
so there will be a cap then on it as far as the number of students that can be present.
I wasn't planning on it.
Well, we have a space,
Space.
we have a space
Yeah.
cap, right? So okay, that's the whole issue then, okay.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, you know, if the gymnasiums are not being utilized, of course, they'll be used during that time too, in the outdoor space.
And the RFP is going to include scholarship, right? Where it's gonna be a requirement that if there's a student who wants to
Oh,
partake
indeed.
but can't pay,
Mhm.
we have those companies,
Yeah.
because from what I understand, that was cut out during a lot of these after-school programs that are in town right now some are actually running in our schools, eliminated the scholarship aspect of post-COVID. So so that we're gonna make sure that that's a requirement.
Like a financial aid
Right,
concept.
right.
Yeah, so.
Sliding scale or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that if students receive free or reduced, some of, there are applications that the state actually pays for it.
Right.
So they'll need to understand how to do that,
Yeah.
companies.
And we expect that this will be in place for September.
Yes.
So,
Let me just
yeah, go ahead.
comment briefly. Thank you. As you know, I'm super excited about this. Everything that you're saying about that you're hearing is in line with what my expectations were, which is that students want help with homework, they want some flexibility. Many families are not gonna use this 5 days a week, but they want the opportunity to use it 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe for one of their children and not for another one of their children, so that they can shuttle them around to all their activities. So I think this is really in line, and I think this is gonna meet a huge demand that we have in the district. So I'm very excited about this. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for all the work on this. Okay, so moving on to new business, we have 2 topics today, and I think maybe I'm gonna flip the order, and we'll do projects for summer work first, so you can get out of here. But so the first topic today is called projects for summer work. We have our the project manager from our consultant, and Justin, if you want to
Thank you, Steve.
go ahead.
I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So I just have a little handout in front of everyone, some of the current projects going on and some of the projects we expect to go out to bid late summer, early fall. So we have 2 projects in the works right now. The first one is at Daly, the pre-K edition. That is currently in progress with an anticipated completion date of probably end of this calendar year. We experienced a couple of material delays that pushed us past the September that we were looking for this year. But fortunately, those have been resolved, and so we're starting to make up some of the time that we lost waiting for some of the roofing material. So we're on target to turn that over at the end of the calendar year. That addition consists of a bunch of pre-K classrooms, a couple of K through 6 classrooms, new steam. That's the first phase of the project, an elevator. Once the new addition is done and the staff moves in, then we'll renovate some of the older existing spaces like the main office, turn that over to classrooms, demo the portables, make new playground spaces. So that'll probably extend into the summer of June 2023 when we finish that exterior site work.
Are you expecting that you would actually turn the new facilities over in January?
Yeah.
They would occupy them?
Well, I would work with the district. We had something similar happen when we did the Guggenheim and Manhaven additions. They wrapped up right around the calendar year. We went through the process of getting the certificate of occupancies for the fire marshals and then coordinating with the custodians to move everybody in over the February break. Because there's a little bit of coordination on the district
Of course,
side
of
to set
course.
things up. So
So when you say complete, that's ready for inspection, not with inspections and CFOs?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, construction complete, everything operational, and then just waiting for the paperwork to occupy the space. Over at Schreiber, we have the technology and cafeteria additions. Both of those are scheduled to wrap up this summer, and then ready for occupancy for September of 2022. too. The new addition in the technology area has a bunch of shop equipment, production areas for like vinyl cutters, 3D printers, and a mezzanine area for storage. The cafeteria addition provided some additional counter seating, as well as direct staircase access up to the commons. The new main entrance will be reconstructed with new stairs, pavers, railings, a handicap ramp, some bench seating and landscaping as well in the front entrance. Though that stuff is ready to be turned over probably, I would say, end of June, early July, weather depending, because that kind of site work is really contingent upon any kind of rain that we get.
And Kathy, have we ordered all the FFE and whatnot with the furniture and
Well, we're in the process for the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Where are we with it? We haven't,
We need to
Got
place the
samples.
order, we just got the samples recently.
okay? Because I know furniture lead times are insane
Yeah.
right now.
And we're kind of between principals, so me and Kathy think we're gonna make the decisions on order.
You may have to make the decisions.
And then for the summer, we have a couple of projects that just got returned back from the state review to the architect with some comments that they have to then incorporate to the drawings and prepare the bid package. I would anticipate that to go out at some point this summer for a fall start. That'll give us the best pricing. If we push that out after the summer rush and start in the fall when work is a little less abundant, then we'll get more competitive pricing. We have a couple of projects set up for bid. We have the Salem and Manor Cafeteria AC projects. And then we also have the Sousa addition and renovation project. That includes the auditorium. So the auditorium will get air conditioning, some new seating. Not all of the seating will be replaced. Some of it has been repaired over the course of the past few years. So the worst sections are scheduled to get replaced. New lighting, new sound system, new finishes in the auditorium. There's also going to be some HVAC upgrades to some of the resource classrooms. That's mostly exhaust and fresh air exchange. And then the new addition is going to be predominantly a STEAM classroom at the back end of the building, and will also include an elevator for the second floor. We're anticipating that to, like I said, go out sometime late summer, early fall, and depending on when the bid is, I would anticipate a 12 to 14 month duration for that project.
Joe,
Where are we on the Salem edition of the STEAM classroom? Has that been gone to bid or
That
anything?
hasn't been-
Nothing's happened with it
Nothing
yet?
yet. Right now, with pricing the way it is, we had sat down and prioritized the remaining projects. One of the main ones was the air conditioning throughout the district,
Right,
so that went out to bid. We're gonna see where these numbers come in with the current environment, see where we're at with the bond right now, and then make a determination of what the scope of work will be for Salem. There's some ideas that have been thrown out to kind of mitigate what we're encountering right now by not doing a full addition or new addition of foundations, but using some of the existing structure that would allow us to build up
okay.
off of it. So that's kind of how we're going to approach Salem, see where we're at once these numbers come in.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Alan, Emily will probably know better. I know that there was some discussion with Sousa and doing some of the additions or waiting until we had all the STEAM rooms done and certain things, and then maybe looking at the Sousa auditorium. But I see the auditorium renovation is here before we're even doing anything on the Salem STEAM room. So I'm just curious, because I know we're getting very close in our finances, and I would hate to see 4 out of your 5 schools have a STEAM room and the 5th one not get it. And so are we planning accordingly for that, or is that in our hindsight, is that in our foresight, or am I making this story up? I'm recalling this from past meetings, but.
yeah, that's something we'll have to talk about because I wasn't
Okay.
aware.
I mean, I could be, again, this is like, I'm going back in the deep, but I don't know, do you remember, Emily, am I?
There was some discussion about not doing some of the work at Sousa so that we can spread out the wealth, basically. But I don't remember the specifics.
That's something we'll definitely look into.
I have a question. This question is really for the administration. So what I see here is Salem and Manor Haven cafeteria HVAC, and then I heard discussion of auditorium HVAC. How is the decision made to do a cafeteria where the students are for like 30 minutes at a time versus getting all of the classrooms done as a priority?
So I can answer that because it has something to do with the administration, it's the bond. 2015 bond that went out, we had one major space air conditioned per building. And in the buildings that you're talking about, Cafeteria, Salem and Manor Haven, their cafeteria is also their auditorium. So that's the one major gathering space. This is all bond-related work that we're talking about. What you're talking about air conditioning going
Right.
forward, that's a totally different conversation. But, so Sousa was getting their auditorium air conditioned because that was their one common space. So it's all bond-related.
And so who decided so that is locked in because.
2015 bond.
So there's
That's what
2015
And some of it, like,
bond
the money
locked
that
us
they've done.
into making
One
this decision.
space, yes.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense to do it's low-hanging fruit, it's one small job per building to do it.
But we had our
It's
conversation.
like one system with, one big air handler and.
But then you also
Yeah.
remember that when we did the facility tours, we learned that we have to upgrade our electricity, right? Before we can even discuss air conditioning. Because our buildings can't, remember, right? So this is why we did the capital reserve. So we talked about the budget passing. But congratulations, Kathy, for also having the foresight, and you, Dr. Hines, for asking for us to put together a capital reserve fund, which we just approved, that the community approved. So as we start to put money into that fund, theoretically, we'll be able to do the upgrades of our electricity, which will help us.
I understand that, but per square foot, to me, it makes more sense to cool off students who are in a space students and teachers who are in a space for 6 hours in a row, rather than for 30 minutes a day right before they go outside. Now, that said, if it's in the 2015 bond, then it was locked in, but I want to make sure
No, I
that
don't
we think about these decisions
Sure.
going forward, because to me, the decision doesn't make a lot of sense. It's possible that it does make sense, and I just don't understand it, but we're now cooling off spaces where students are not hanging out.
But everybody gets a shot to be in those spaces each day, and
And they are
again, it's a much
right.
easier
They
job.
spend
but
time there.
It's a low-hanging fruit job to just put one AC system in one room, it's one distribution for electricity, I think it's a really smart
We also
first
got
thing
an
to do.
estimate from
That's-
our architect, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the range of $70 million for air conditioning. So, there you go.
Yeah.
I understand that I'm not promoting it, but that is my
But
general
it's
question.
something
But
we should-
regardless, we're locked into
Yes.
it because we chose to be locked into it in 2015.
As long as you still have money for it, yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, as Julie was pointing out, like, they have to start thinking about what work they do in what order, because they can only do until.
Right.
That's what my-
Funds on
I understand.
Yeah.
So
Which-
Can I ask a question
Of course.
with regards to Schreiber? So you do not foresee this front entrance of Schreiber being ready by graduation?
No.
Right, so you're saying July, but graduation's the 23rd.
Yes, it won't be.
Okay, so I guess what we need to make sure is that we have our students, because we usually have everybody come down the front steps and whatnot, so we have to make sure that
I'll
we,
speak with Jen.
Jay knows how to organize the students that way. Dr. Block has observed something, and I'm sure he's gonna say this, we're not changing the letters. So Schreiber High School is as is, whereas we're doing, as you pointed out, all this other work, the railing. Is there a way that we can upgrade the letters? Maybe it's just a shining just of the letters. By the way, I looked at the letters. I do think that if they're just shine, like if they were just buffed, they're not bad. I know you don't like them, but we're doing this entire new entrance, and the letters are gonna stay as is. I don't know if there's something in the plan to spice them up a little.
There's nothing specific in the plan to address the lettering, but I can reach out to the contractor. and
There's
get
like a
some-
little shining. I really think if we shine them, if you look at the letters, they're not bad. They just have to be shined.
I agree that they're not terrible, but
We're
I'm
not
not
gonna
gonna.
spend extra money on it, but if we can shine them, maybe we'll do it as a project. We'll
Yes.
all get on a ladder and shine. And see who can fall off.
Are you gonna hold my ladder?
I have a few ladders.
Yes, I think that would certainly shining would definitely help. I think we should just to think about it, given how much money we're spending on the overall school, and I think it would be nice to at least consider. So.
Those little details make a big difference in having the final project look good.
Yes.
Jim Ristano couldn't be here unfortunately, so he sent me a list of things besides the bond work that are gonna be completed. He said at Manor Haven, the HSA has funded, new basketball goals. So they want this done in June, so he still has to coordinate this. At Sousa, he's dividing room 203. They're gonna remove and restore casework to accommodate new unit ventilators and supply electric for the unit ventilator.
I'm sorry, where was that?
That's at Sousa, room 203.
Just one room?
Yes,
Okay.
they're gonna be dividing it, so.
Okay.
Guggenheim, they're replacing 500+ square feet of corridor flooring. They're replacing the roof over the storage building. It was former module class. Possible split of 2 classrooms. At Talley, he has, they're doing custom building shelves in room 112. At the high school, they're building casework for the technology addition, and they also have the roof work that was just approved at the last board meeting. Weber, they're replacing cabinets and countertops, in the Fabs room. They're dividing room 2/4 and creating an office or a lesson room. They're locating banks of lockers from one wing to another. Salem, there's really no major projects, just the roof work, which was also just approved. And the technology department, they wanted a new office space created over here. So, which is really just putting up quest orders.
Would you send us that list or post it
Sure.
in the meeting minutes? Thanks so much. Does anybody have any other questions on the
I do.
member?
Do you have a question? This is probably for administration. With the 4 new pre-K classrooms, are we, do we have enough room for the families who want to send their kids to pre-K? Would we be okay with the
Oh, sure.
current enrollment?
Yeah.
Because I know I heard that a lot of families were looking to send their kids to pre-K here, but couldn't get in because
Well,
of.
there's a
There's a cap,
system
too.
of coming
Yeah,
in
there's a
here though,
system, yeah.
right? You can't just come in.
I understand, but is there room to expand the program with this number of classrooms?
Yeah, haven't had that conversation yet, but where we stand right now with the number of students we have enough room, but if we're looking to potentially expand, that's a
That's a
conversation
bigger
I would need
conversation.
to have
Mhm.
Right.
with the administration, and certainly the board.
So this 4 is consistent with what we currently have, it's just changing the space?
That's right.
Yes.
I actually had a question on a slightly similar vein. Dr. Shields, based on what you see in kindergarten enrollment, have you looked at space and classrooms? I mean, are we,
So I'm having those.
sorry, I can't think when someone's nodding and shaking their head next to me, but have you thought about,
You can't multitask.
it's very hard to have a conversation when somebody's showing, shaking their head while you're talking, but, right next to you. But, yes, okay, just keep doing it. No, I just wanted to understand, from the standpoint of like, if sections have to change,
Yeah, so I'm in conversations with the principals right now about
Yeah,
that.
okay,
That
great.
if we need to add classrooms, where would they go?
Yeah, so you are asking these questions?
Yes.
And it is a
We
question?
have to-
Yeah.
Yeah, we are at a point where it's much higher than any of us ever anticipated.
So my question is, what does the solution look like, or is it,
We're talking about that in cabinet after this
Okay.
meeting.
got it,
And as you know, those kindergarten numbers keep changing,
I know,
so we wanna try and.
they tend not to go down though, right?
No.
Sure, very true.
Yeah.
We wanna come forward with a plan that, with only one need, instead of having to come to you again in August.
That's
So
right.
there will be, that was really what I was getting at, is will there
Absolutely.
be asks and needs?
Yeah, we hope that we come to you once,
Okay,
and we are all comfortable with that ask the first time, instead of having to come back again.
so should we expect that that's gonna come in August?
No, in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Don't you think it could potentially also still change by
Well,
August?
we're trying to anticipate what the surge typically
Velocity.
is in August, yeah.
Yeah.
Question usually.
But I think I thank you for trying to come to us only once, but I think for us, we should be prepared for an August or even September discussion. Because I don't know that we can actually predict. But now,
Right.
I mean, I know we'll try, but it could be very likely that it's August, I think,
But I think it's very good.
based on
that-
past.
But I think it's good that they're seeing
Yeah.
that we're gonna have a problem and they're thinking about
Yeah,
it
when
now.
you look at enrollment, you
Yeah.
see it.
And this is a problem with the number of teachers that are currently assigned. This isn't a space problem. You have classrooms for everybody, let's say, right?
Yeah, we're having those conversations right now to make sure we have a place to put them.
Okay, right, because there's a budgetary section issue, and there's the classroom is maybe an issue.
Oh, I heard them splitting some classrooms.
Yeah,
Right.
you heard Mr. Harrison splitting classrooms. I don't know if that was why.
I would think.
Well, we will share that information with you if we're asking for
Maybe we
additional
should
sections.
wait.
Okay.
I think we should wait and see, because it seems like they have many questions they have to answer,
There's a
so
lot
we
of
should,
different
yes,
entities, so we want to anticipate that.
exactly.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just going back, I had one
Yes,
question,
sure,
and kind of got
absolutely.
skipped. So in the places where you're upgrading HVAC, in certain classrooms, like I heard you say about the resource rooms, and you said it was, exhaust and makeup air, are these AC systems, or are they just like heat exchangers, or what's the?
Just exhaust and AC.
Okay,
I'm sorry, just exhaust and fresh air exchange.
and so is it the heat exchange, or is it literally,
No, it's
literally just fresh air?
it's literally just an air exchange. It's probably, I have to look at the plans, but I think it's a room that doesn't have an exterior window, or, and it's
Got it,
just,
so it's literally just ventilation.
just
Okay.
ventilation.
Got it. Okay. Anybody else have questions, or should we let Justin go?
Thank
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
So the last topic we had today, this is one that we had actually discussed, I think, 2 meetings ago, was, this year was the first year that we had I guess a somewhat new board budget process throughout the year. So, what we wanted to talk about today was, basically to take everybody's feedback, both yours and ours, and just see if there's anything that we need to adjust, or if we're happy with how it went. If you're happy, we could hear from trustees on how they felt it went from your standpoint. We'd also love to hear how you guys felt it went from us, and what we could do differently, and just have like a really, open conversation about the entire process. So, I guess in terms of who should start, Dr. Hines, should I put you on the spot again?
No,
And-
I think I should defer to you since this is your committee, and then I can answer that.
Okay. I guess the proof is in the pudding. I'll give my opinion first, and maybe we'll just go around to all of the trustees. Obviously, the budget passed with flying colors, so presumably either the community was happy with how it went, or they just weren't watching and were gonna vote yes anyway. I can't tell you which one. The only, I think it was nice to have all of the different administrators coming and giving us, presentations of what they were asking for. My comment, that I was a little bit, where I would give some feedback, and maybe I'm totally missing the boat here, but I felt that in all of those meetings that we had, and those many, many, many hours of meetings, we really only spent, I would say we spent 80 to 90% of our time probably talking about 5 to 10% of our budget, maybe even 3% of our budget in terms of like a dollar amount. So we were talking about a lot of little, $20,000, $5,000 items over many, many, many hours of meetings, and we didn't really spend a lot of time talking about really like the big picture items that move the needle. So I'm wondering if there's a more efficient way to approach the allocation of time relative to the dollars. And I don't necessarily have an answer. It just seemed like we spent so much time on a very small percentage of the dollar amount.
What are the big
Yeah.
picture items that would have moved in?
Uh,
Is
I-
that
I-
just
you know,
contractual obligations?
It
Maybe we
is,
should
but
have a
it
meeting about
is.
that.
It is.
So maybe
Yeah.
that's something that, just going forward, we actually spend one opportunity to just say, here are the things that we have no control over, because I think that's
Yeah.
one of the feedback that we also hear from people, that they think, oh my God, this big increase, but a lot of the big increase has to do with contractual obligations that we have no say in. So maybe that's something going forward, we do a meeting that just says, here's what we can't control, and, right, this is the role.
Well, here's what we've tried to do to
Well, we
help
can't
control.
change the
Well,
contracts.
We can't change the contracts, but we can also look at how the contracted money is being allocated. You know, when you look at the budget for an elementary school, but there's a lot of things that go into it, and the community can see, you know, this is how many teachers are at this school, this is how many FTEs we have at this school, this is how many paras we have, this is how much it's costing us for all of these paras, this is how much we're spending on electricity, and et cetera,
Things
and
we
then
can
everybody,
control,
things
right?
we can control it because we control it by moving staff around between buildings or cutting programs, or how much money are we spending. You know, at Schreiber, we are spending X because we have shop, and shop costs us this many FTEs. So we could control it by, instead of having, and I'm not saying we should, maybe we want more shop and less math, or, so these are, I don't think it's true that we can't control it. We can't
By
control the
eliminating
contracts.
program.
Or changing programs. We
Yeah.
can mix, you can change it around. So it's not true that we don't have control over it. It's how the pot is stirred. We can't change what it costs us for an FTE, but we can certainly change how many we're using and where we're using them. Yeah.
Can I just add to that
Please.
point? So one of the notes that I made is maybe in the beginning of the year, and I know this is hard to do because this deals with forecasting and foresight, right? But maybe in that November, December time period, we start looking at forecasting for what our enrollment is going to look like, whatever we have to do to see what that's going to be. And then when you're doing that, if you're going into your administrative section, maybe if one of the meetings is dedicated to administrative, which is personnel, right? You're listing all of those things. You can tie that together to say, this is how many teachers we have per school. This is where we're forecasting our enrollment is going to look like throughout this time period. And this is how our allocation of staff looks. Does this make sense? So for example, I will say this year, when we talked about allocation of FTEs, specifically at the elementary level, we already in parentheses indicated what schools those FTEs were going to. Now, I don't know if that's a for sure, or if that's because that's where we added those FTEs. You know, from last year we had an increase. They just so happened to correlate that last year we added these FTEs in these locations, and now they're continuing. But if we're constantly showing what our enrollment is going to be and how we're reallocating, and we don't necessarily have to add, but we're moving from, you know, pot A to pot B or school A to school B, that gives the board a clearer vision of how we're utilizing those contractual obligations that maybe we can't renegotiate a contract for, but that we're not going and spending more monies for. And the same would be true not just from a teaching standpoint, but I'd be curious for us to look at from a social work standpoint, which we didn't really discuss very much this year, and any other, you know, staff. I know that would just give that clearer picture, to give them some insight and depth,
Yeah.
and really focusing it. And in reality, I appreciated, Kathy, this was the first year where we really talked administrative, capital,
Three-part budget.
programming.
That's right.
Right? So even saying, and then within that it drilled down, but really administrative, so focus on that in your work session. Capital, focus on that in your work session. And programming, maybe programming needs 2 work sessions because there is a lot of programming. That's the bulk of our system and what we do as well. And that's where those budget builders are able to showcase what they do.
I just want to be careful of the word, are you meaning personnel? When you say administrative?
Yes.
Yes, it's just personnel, but administrative, that's personnel, all personnel, yes.
But just be careful, because the critique that I'm worried about the community will hear is, you know, the same that we hear every year, administration is top heavy.
Yes.
There's too much money in administration. So I just want to be very clear here and in the community that's watching, the term you're really referring to is the overall personnel, not administration.
Correct, I said yes, yes.
But
Okay.
then that brings up a point, and that was like the feedback. This was the first time that we actually presented it this way, which is required, by the way, to present this way, which is interesting that we've never done it this way. So going forward, what I would suggest,
When they sue us.
I would just suggest that when we write administrative, because I think that's the required word, if we could just put in our like chart of parentheses that says personnel, you know, and all, like one of, right?
Yeah.
Just so that because I did see feedback, we all did,
Yeah.
that people believe that when they see administrative, they think it's you guys, and you all got a $2 million raise.
Yes.
Congratulations.
But a lot of it is Personnel is not just administration.
Correct.
Personnel is program.
Right.
Correct.
Right. So if you, when we're putting it out, like on that chart, if we could just somehow put in a parentheses to explain what that is.
So, going back to the three-part budget, you know, anytime program is more than 75%, home run, and we
Mhm.
highlighted that. And again,
Mhm.
never highlighted that before. And
Mhm.
administration was below 10%, which is where you want to be, which is really great. I'm wondering feedback-wise, because the methodology was so vastly different from years past, right? So, you know, to your point, Mr. Smith, regarding how we spend our time, because what Kathy, I think, really did incredibly well was to showcase different parts of our budget related to curriculum and instruction. So maybe is there a way we can consolidate that more so we can have some of those more in-depth conversations about the nuts and bolts of certain things? I'm just wondering, and I probably should know this, how much of a school budget, percentage-wise, are fixed costs? Costs that we truly just
90%.
Well, it depends how you define fixed costs, right? That's the other thing. Like, is a fixed cost is literally keeping the lights on and having the minimum number of staff you need to just meet state requirements, or that's your fixed costs.
No,
Doesn't
is
mean-
it fixed cost contracts?
Not necessarily, yeah, but the contracts
Wait,
are,
when we
the
say
contracts,
fixed costs, I'm gonna ask you
Yeah.
the next question. When we say fixed costs, isn't it what your contractual obligations are?
Yes, but I think what Mr. Smith is saying, they may be contractual, but can we allocate it differently?
or allocate less or more, right?
Just, yeah.
Well, right, so
Yeah.
contractual, but we can choose to eliminate a section at an element, or eliminate staff, right? That's the,
Right.
and
So
then that
that's-
lowers your.
Control section sizes, increase, decrease section size. I'm
Right.
just saying, that changes how many staff you need. So that's outside of, the contract just determines the staff's compensation, right? It
And
doesn't
board
say how many,
policy does.
yeah,
Typically,
yeah.
what you would do is look at a rollover, so if you kept everything the same,
Mhm.
what are we talking about? And you look at your health insurance, your benefits.
Those are
What is
fixed.
that gonna look like next year? And then you would say, okay, we only have $3 million we can add to this, or we have to cut $4 million to stay under the cap. So that's kind of.
That's how you
Yeah.
start.
So-
You go first, and then I'll have my question.
So can we start like, I think that's where we didn't start, right? We used
You
that,
did-
we
you
didn't
did, but I
start,
did.
we
Yeah,
didn't
like
hear
we
that.
did.
And
Yeah.
then we added that at the end as that extra meeting.
what I
So if we could start there publicly,
Right.
that might be that might be easier
Yes.
for the board, the community, everyone to
Right.
start from the same place.
And then I have one, I guess, additional question, and I don't know if this is something that you guys look at, but has anybody looked at, and again, this is like a big comment that we get from anti-budget folks, but it doesn't mean that everything they say is wrong necessarily. Have we looked at like the efficiency of kind of matching, especially at Weber and Schreiber, that we have the right amount of staff and teachers relative to students in terms of that, not just that we have, how do I put, like, meaning maybe there's too many teachers in one department that's getting smaller class sizes and not enough teachers in another department that has very large class sizes, so we're not getting like a true efficient utilization of students to FTEs. Is that something that gets looked at to make sure that we have?
Yeah, so we actually discussed this. I think one of the board trustees asked class sizes at Schreiber at least, right? And we saw the distribution, we saw extremes actually, you know, some classes, I'm not talking about phys ed or music, chorus, but some class sizes were in the low 30s, right? And then some electives were 6.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, is how do we attack that?
You could eliminate those electives.
Yes.
We could.
Yeah,
And so the difficulty
Could
in
we have
doing
that
so,
meeting?
some of those electives.
I think we should.
Yeah,
We
some
it
of
might be a
those
hard meeting, but we
electives,
have to have it.
It's,
I would
those are some of the sacred cows that we've had here for a very long time.
research that.
So it's a little more complex, but yes, can we have that conversation? Of course we can, but I think the first step.
But it might not be only about, maybe it's not about cutting it, maybe it's about finding ways to get, instead of 6, having 14 and taking stress off somewhere
Sure.
else.
Sure.
And that's a way that these contractual numbers do become fungible, because you can start better balancing how you're using the contracted time you're paying for.
Mhm.
And that's why I say it's
Right,
not, yeah,
the challenge there is
Yeah,
that
I'm
you
sure.
don't know how many kids are gonna sign up for X class.
Right.
right, I understand,
Until maybe June, and you've already gone through your whole budget cycle.
right.
So you may be making decisions that you can't anticipate what student response is gonna be.
We
But it's
can,
historically
as a-
based though, you're saying though that a lot of, you're saying that there's electives that have 6 kids, I'm imagining that same elective has 6 kids every year, right?
It depends, but don't forget that as a Board of Education, we do get a list of classes in, I believe, September, October, that we approve going against our board policy, because we do have a board policy. So as a Board of Education, we can, at that meeting, not approve those classes, which would then mean that we would have to then, the administration of the building, in each building,
Right.
they would have to go back and.
But they'd have to
undid-
unenroll kids that are,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is,
So
that would be
that's the
that's a
decision we need to
heavy-handed
make.
approach, but we could give them the feedback of, and again, this isn't the meeting to get into the meat of it, but I'm just wondering if it's something that you
Absolutely.
guys are, my question is, are you thinking about it, and are you
Yeah.
looking at it, or is it just kind of
And we
taken
can
for
have a
granted that this is
conversation
what
more
it is?
with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing also we have to remember is that at the high school level, and even at the middle school, or particularly this is all at the high school, if you eliminate a class, it doesn't mean that you've given this teacher now another, because some of it is specialized right? So it's really, I think there's a perception that there are teachers teaching 6 kids and they could have been teaching 20, but that particular teacher that's teaching 6 may not be the teacher who's qualified to teach the 20, right?
And that's what I'm,
There's a
that's
balance.
kind of what I'm getting at, is like, do we holistically try to make sure that we're really thinking about when we have a very specialized teacher who really is not being spread among like a typical number of kids, is it really something that we need, I guess, or are we just kind of going with inertia? That's my question.
No, it's a
Yeah.
good question. I think the opposite side of that is we have many teachers who believe their class sizes are too large and we need to
Yes.
increase the number of sections.
As we heard them say at board meetings.
So
Right.
there's,
Yes.
point counterpoint to all of this, but to answer your question, yes, we are looking at it, and certainly with Katie coming in, we'll be speaking with her about that too, when she begins to try.
Because obviously the budget neutral way of reducing class sizes is fewer, very small classes. If, assuming that the math works like that.
Sure.
Yeah. Deborah?
I would just caution, or I'd ask administration to caution that if we were to do this in September or October, whenever we're asked to approve this, you will suddenly have students who are now out of class, whatever that class
I
was,
agree.
which would be a credit, and the schedules are very difficult to then reread. I'm sure from an administrative perspective, guidance counselors or the assistant principals or whoever is trying to do that will find themselves, and it may impact a small group of children, but it is meaningful to those children who it will impact. So I would just ask if this was an exercise that was going to be done just maybe over the summer or.
And I want to be very clear.
Whenever
remember,
you all
I
feel
wasn't
most
suggesting
appropriate,
like
but-
that we would, in October, vote. I was more making sure that they're thinking about it so that we try to preempt getting to that point. Or maybe Dr. Hines says, no, we need these particular classes and they're
Well,
off the
could be.
table. And then
They're
we say, yeah.
historically the same
Yeah.
classes, so you do make a point about so I think perhaps what I'm hearing Mr. Smith say is if you could give us, as a Board of Education, a list of the classes that are historically underserved, so less students. I mean, I can probably list them off the top of my head, but I think it'd be great to document them. And maybe
Well, that could be this
we
could-
could have a discussion at June 7th about being proactive as a Board of Education and eliminating the possibility for those classes to be that small.
So, wait a minute, so are we giving a directive to our
I'm asking.
superintendent
No, no.
right now, or are we?
I'm asking, I'm
But this-
hearing
No,
a
Yeah,
discussion.
what I'm saying is for next year's budget process, it's something to talk about. I
So
think
you want
2020.
the,
So-
Not what I
the
want.
6
I,
classes to be okay this
What's the
year.
recommendation of this committee? Do we want them to prepare anything for us? I don't think it hurts to have the data, right? I don't think it hurts for us to speak about something without having until we have the information. So I don't think it's a poor recommendation. I think I support the recommendation of, can the district look at, over the course of the last 5 years, what are the classes at the high school and the middle school that have consistently fallen under the 15 and under? I think that's the calculation
Yes.
that we
It
use.
is
I would then add, we should look at 25 and more.
Yes,
I
agree.
appreciate that also, so I think that would be the recommendation of this committee, to bring to the board, because again, we haven't asked the whole board, do they wanna discuss this? And do we wanna have our administration working on this? We don't want it to be futile work, we want this to be something that if this is what the Board of Education wants to discuss, then this is,
So do
that
you
can be
think
how
that's
we
something
handle
we
it.
should bring to the board, to the next board meeting?
I think it would be,
I think
yes, I
that's a
think
good
that's
idea.
how the process
So
works.
that's,
Yeah.
well, I was throwing out, we were talking openly about ideas on the budget process, so this was kind of my comment for next year's budget process, but if the rest of the board thinks it's something we should look at sooner,
Well, we
We'll
don't
bring it up
know,
at the
we
next
won't
board
know,
meeting,
but
right.
you could ask the committee members,
Well,
are you
remember they're-
okay asking, are we okay
yeah,
giving
and they're all
this?
here, so I think we could get a sense of them, right?
But we
that
didn't
we're
notice
just
this
there.
as a work session of the board.
So I think we can get we're allowed to ask for a sense now.
I am under the impression this is a committee,
It is.
and it's noticed as a committee. So I would get a recommendation about if we wanted to recommend that we would make this as a discussion, and then on June 7th, that would be where the board would formally vote on it, as opposed to just getting a sense. And that way everyone would be able to participate.
What will we be voting on?
On that we would want to do the last list of classes that are under 15 and over 25, and that it is something that the board wants to look at, what actions and next steps we would want to take based on
So,
that data.
yeah, and I don't know that it's any sort of formal vote or
Yeah,
resolution.
why would we
That seems a little
vote
extreme.
on that?
Yeah,
So
we
the
haven't
committee
voted on
makes,
things like that.
the committee has an action, and the committee goes to the board and says, at our committee level, we discussed this. We would like to see this report from the administration. Does the rest of the board agree? Does the entire board agree? Because the committee's 3 people, so just because 3 people want something doesn't mean the entire board wants it, right? So that's, a vote is not a no vote, it's just, does the rest of the committee think we need to do this report? Yes, the rest of the board, that's
Right.
all.
Yeah, and then we'll just give you the
Yeah,
directive.
that's fine, we'll bring it, the 3 of us can vote now, we can bring it up, I don't know that we've
Do you
done votes.
understand, Adam? It's not an actual
Yeah.
formal vote.
Well,
It's just
that's-
asking the rest of the board. 3 people can't decide what the administration wants to do.
But it doesn't, but what I'm saying is we don't need a formal vote in a
Yeah?
resolution. We can
No,
do
no,
this.
no,
That's-
no, no,
that's
no,
all,
it's
that's
not,
what I-
no,
yeah,
that's
that's what I was
no, no,
thinking,
no,
yeah,
no,
no,
yeah.
no,
yes.
The piece that I have trouble with is we ask the administrators questions all the time, and they come back with data, and now we're asking the administrators a question to come back with data, and I'm not sure what the dividing line is between asking a very narrow question, that they just say, sure, here's the answer to your question, I provide.
I'm just trying to do it the right way. I
Well,
hear what you're
but you
saying.
see what I'm saying? It's like this continuum of like,
Three
well, when is the
people-
question? Well, but you see what I'm saying? Like we ask the administrators questions all the the and they come back.
Who's we? When you say we?
Trustees.
Trustees, individual trustees.
No, I don't reach out, I'm not saying we reach out, but like,
Yeah.
but right now, we're asking the questions, and they're giving us, right, like, so Howard just gave us a whole report, right? That was, I don't think that came from the budget committee, I don't think that was a board requested report on this.
Correct.
And now we're saying that this report, for some reason, is different and has to go to the board to approve that the board has to report.
I see it as we're giving a directive to our superintendent to start pulling data and provide us with something that's gonna then begin a bigger discussion.
Sure.
Before we have him delve into all of that work, we should get a sense from the entire board, because this is gonna be a big discussion and has implications. So I think, again, it's just part of the practice and procedure to say, if you're gonna go into all this work, and this is something that we wanna make sure that the board wants to talk about long-term.
I'm not opposed to any of that, but what I'm saying is, and I think it's right, because I think it is a bigger, but we have made an implicit judgment call here that this is a big project and other questions are smaller projects, and that's why we need to bring it to the board, but nobody actually ever made that decision. There's no time commitment associated with it, it's just sort of like a going by feel thing. And so,
I don't follow, but it doesn't matter, but let's not keep going on.
Okay,
this.
so the bottom line is, I think, let's not derail the whole conversation.
Yeah.
I
This
think
is
we
about
all
the
support
budget
it, so this
process.
is a.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
exactly,
right,
for
right,
23,
right, right,
24.
right, right,
So
right.
we'll take the suggestion of talking about this topic, but I want to continue giving everybody a chance to give feedback on the budget process. So I want to do the committee members first, Julie and Adam, and then we're only about less than half an hour, we're still community comments, so I'd love to get everybody's, feedback now. So you want to Julie and then Adam?
You go first, go ahead, I just have a list, but go ahead, I already spoke about stuff.
Okay,
Sorry.
so first, your previous comment, I really support, which is that there's this, I'm not gonna use the term gap, but there's this potential differential between what our spending is and what our revenue is, that is that is what we have to bridge. And I felt like I didn't really understand that until the April 5th meeting. And I felt like that was too late because like my feeling is like a lot of what the board has to do is decide on the trade-offs that we have to make. And I didn't really understand what the trade-offs were, whether we had to like find $1 million or, cut things for $2 million until very late in the process. So I would recommend that we do it earlier, even if the revenue numbers are not clear, because I know that is a big, I know that's a big issue. So that's my one biggest point of feedback. We were very fortunate this year that we did not have to make tough choices. I don't expect other years are going to be, there are going to be future years where we have to make really tough choices. So understanding that earlier. And then in concert with that, I felt like there were a lot of board meetings where I wasn't able to really wrap my hands around that. So I didn't necessarily see that there was a huge value in having all of those board meetings. It was a lot, and I want to be, I view things as like you all have very limited time constraints and time that you're spending in board meetings with us. You are not spending either dealing with direct educational issues or leisure time that you're spending with your family. And I want to like minimize the time that you are spending in board meetings so that you can focus on your efforts on other things. And so I want to reduce the number of meetings next year if we can, and just focus on the one meeting that I thought was really good is the early April one. That's my feedback.
So Mr. Smith stepped away. I just want to go through quickly. Thank you for everything. I personally have sat through a number of budget meetings, and I appreciated the work of the budget builders, the fact that the budget builders presented it, and being able to engage with them and ask them their questions. You heard, I do agree, we could have done the April 5th first, and even though those numbers were squishy, right? And we're going to watch them change for every meeting, then I think that would have set us up wonderfully. I don't know that we necessarily needed less meetings. I think 3 to 4 total for our work sessions are actually great so that we can cover that 3-part component of our budget, which I did support that we sent it out this way. I would just ask that in that 3rd or 4th meeting that the ask of the board recommendation-wise kind of does come up. So for example, it's been my experience that capital, for example, is a big discussion about, does the Board of Education want to allocate monies from reserves, or do you want to send a transfer to capital up in this way? And there are recommendations that are made to the board, and the board is asked to make a decision on those. That 3rd or 4th work session meeting, if we're structuring it in the same way, to just clearly delineate, to say, here's what our issue is, here's what our recommendation is, and I'm now pausing to ask the board, is this the direction that you want to go? I feel like we just didn't have, we had a lot of assumptions and not the physical ask. And we were all in agreement and we asked the questions, but again, just formalizing that a little more so that we are all clear when we're making the recommendations and what is happening from that standpoint. And then
That's a really good one, I think. That's kind of the crux of it. Yeah.
Thank you. And then, because I have to say, listen, I did appreciate, I want to also say that this year, and I know you worked on it and Shannon also worked on it, but the clarity of the budget brochure I thought was fantastic. It really showcased the return on the investment, which I think we have not done a great job of showcasing in the past, as well as clearly delineating those line items. So I appreciate that work that was done and laid out.
Take a little credit for it.
No, I appreciate the work that was done on, and I think and we saw community members walking around with that, and I had community members come up to me with that in hand, which I've never had before, saying, I just noticed this, because it was clearer. So I look forward to next year, when I know it'll be even better, and it will be wonderful, but that was I thought that was very helpful, and that we continue to move in that direction. My only last point, to summarize it, is I don't think from this meeting, last year we came up with a budget calendar. I don't know that we formally posted it anywhere for the community. It was on our agenda.
It was only on the agenda.
And I would like to see that next year, especially with our new website, and I do appreciate how we had a section on budget. It was very clear. Any community member could go back, any board member could go back to it. I would like to see that calendar delineating through all of those things, including the required, the state hands out a calendar that looks very similar to that, and then we incorporate our work sessions in there. I'd like to see that posted early and make that an objective for budget and facilities in the, you know, early months, November, December, and put that up forward so that everyone.
So we approved it at our first budget meeting, so I think that you have to go into board docs to find it, because I actually went
Yes.
to look for it myself a few times. So I think maybe that's probably when, Kathy, you could just like, we don't have to talk about it again, just kind of thinking about once it's decided, thinking about how to post it.
And
Maybe even how you name the meetings on the district calendar.
Right, well, or even on the, I mean, even just, we're gonna, I'm assuming, have a budget section always on our website, so it should just automatically go there, and I do think, while I appreciate that we did it in September, October, I do think November, December is, you're gonna have a clearer picture, and all those dates are gonna be publicized for us, and, you know, to lay out, and it gives the administration the time to kind of put their ducks in a row
Yeah.
also, and we can see what we need to tackle.
And next year, the budget committee can probably focus off of this year's calendar and kind of say, okay, this, what worked, because we ended up moving a few things back
Yes.
last year, so we can go back. Actually, I'll email you I'll handwrite what we actually talked about each week compared to the original calendar, so we can start from that next year. Maybe we'll just, I think,
What we have to do, the committee
Because certain things
structure
just-
still, but yeah.
yeah, this is, because just I remember certain things that we had on our original agenda, to your point, that we made in September, they just weren't ready
Right,
for us.
Right.
It was impossible.
right, and so
Yeah.
that just to be more thoughtful about, again, why we take till November, December to do that, and then that way it's laid out for everyone very clearly, and if you so desire that you would like to enhance that calendar more and include your timeline for your budget builders, et cetera, just so that everyone sees and they see what their role is, that's for you to consider, but that would be, that's my feedback on that part of it all. And I think that's really my goal.
I think that like the truth of the matter is, we didn't really use the budget committee much to talk about the budget.
Right.
And the question is, was that intentional? Did it work better that way? And if true, if so, maybe there is no place for a budget committee. And you know what I'm saying? Because we ended up doing so much of our budget work in the evening sessions
Yeah,
that we were just really carrying certain like side facilities conversations through this.
yes.
The question is, and this is maybe a board question, actually I'd love to hear from you, is there even a place for this committee? No, seriously, the way we ended up doing it.
Well, can I add a comment?
Yeah.
Can I add a
Yeah.
comment to that? I've thought very long and hard about committee structures, and I've spoken to Mike a lot about committee structures just through the course of years. I do think that there is a place for budget and facilities, a committee, because I do think there are sometimes in a smaller group, you need to brainstorm some of this
Yeah.
and then present it again as an action item or recommendation to your bigger board to then kind of hash out. And you've had all that hard conversation, right? Because sometimes
Right.
3 opinions versus 7 is easier. But maybe the timeline for how frequent we meet
Yeah.
is shortened. And really we focus more on that aspect of budget season or right before budget
Totally.
season, making that calendar November, December, knowing what we need to bring forth to the board, those tougher conversations that are gonna be recommendations, and doing that way. You could enhance, as other school districts do as well, if you feel you're going to have an issue with your budget, you could bring community members on, and again, when you're bringing community members on during budget season, you're actually getting a feel and a sense of what the community is thinking, and also when prioritizing, hearing, granted, only from a few voices. Now I know I went too far, but
No.
I started strong.
I think it's a conversation we're gonna have to have over the summer, because I've been kind of this whole year thinking, as I'm thinking about these agendas, is that a lot of times we were like digging for stuff to talk about that was really updates for the whole board, and we were talking about school buses most frankly, because I think that so much of the budget was really happened.
It does.
So
It
there's no
does.
reason for us to show up at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning when we're just hearing things that I'm just gonna repeat at the meeting. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's a much larger conversation, as you said, about all the committees that we have, to be honest with you. I think it's something we really need to And we'll have differing opinions, as we should. But the purpose and what the, I guess, the return on that investment of time, is it actually doing something that's meaningful? But as far as this, I would agree. We spoke about the budget, maybe 15% of our overall conversations. And in as much as I appreciate everybody coming together, it is important for us to have, not offline, because we're online, these types of conversations. But I would maybe do it quarterly if we need to. And if we need to increase that during the budget season itself, we can adjust. So I appreciate that input.
Yeah, I know Adam was happy with that.
Yeah, no, Dr. Hines, I do agree with that. Well, I'm going to say something that's going to surprise you. So I appreciate us talking about this because I have felt like there's been some duplicativeness in like when we talk about agenda items, like it was like there's not much. I was like, how could there not be much for a budget agenda during budget season?
Because we did it all in the meetings.
And that's fine. And so maybe quarterly is the right way to go for next year, and then we see how it goes. I would say that, but in terms of the overall committees, like I think that the policy, the policy committee, I think actually gets,
A lot of work done.
yeah, real work done each month, and I think, and then
Dr.
brings.
Fields was hoping that one was getting canceled.
I'm usually the one that says that, and I'm the one that's saying like, I think that gets real work done every month, and then brings that work separately to the board, which then you usually reject. But
That's how this committee should work, right? But the policy committee is very easy, because you got a policy, or you have a
and then it
framework,
brings,
right?
yes, yeah.
I want to bring us away from just
Yes.
talking about committees, not
Okay,
necessarily every
sorry.
time,
Yes, yes.
but just specifically about budget. And I know that there's two folks here who want to give feedback on the
Do you want
budget
to go first?
process. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't say my one thing, you're likely gonna come.
Say.
Actually, it was a thought that came to my mind when I was trying to think about what I liked about this process. And it piggybacks on this entire conversation we just had, which is that I found that the curriculum meetings that talked about program, which impact budget, those connections were really, really helpful. So, for example, the meetings that we had about CTE and the Twilight program. So we were
That's a great
informed about program. So what I imagine is, with Dr. Hines as the lead, your vision of where you want to take us, right? And going to curriculum/budget to say, these are the things we're still not, we haven't achieved yet. I'd love them, and here's why, and they cost X dollars. So I think that marriage was really helpful to us because we were fully on board and we were not happy when Twilight was out. So I think that shows the real effectiveness of the committee structure, because that informed us and impacted program and budget right away. So that's my.
That's a great point.
So I think every opportunity to get this issue out to the public is an opportunity well spent. So I appreciated the frequency of the meetings, because it engaged the public. I think there was actual transparency in addition to perceived transparency, and just having that information, because passing the budget is so very important. Whether we're staying at whatever the budget is, or, well, that wouldn't make sense, but, because that would be contingency then, but wherever we were within the tax cap, I think it's really important for the community to be educated on a very broad scale. And the HSA meeting where budget presentations were great, but they're not available to the entire public. And so this is on live stream, and people can go back and review the various topics that were discussed, hear the questions that were asked, follow up with questions if they want to. And to me, it was a great vehicle to bring the community along bit by bit, piece by piece, because every year you will get new people who are new to this process, who have never heard about it before, for whom this is a foreign language. And so teaching them bit by bit, taking their hands as they go along, I heard as I was going around the past few weeks, was really, really helpful, especially to newbies. And we always have newbies in the district, always. And I think we should never take that for granted. I like the building block aspect of it, where you showed us what was being added, what the wish list was. Because this year I think we were able to fulfill the majority, if not all of the wish list, but that may not be the case in the future. So for the board to see, building upon what we already have, now granted, those are all those previous years of wish lists, which we're not going to dissect the way you're dissecting the new wish list, but to have us see, okay, here's what guidance wanted this year, here's what Daily wanted this year, here's what the NL department wanted this year, to see the various components broken down, I appreciate it. I was able to get a much better idea of the component building blocks than I have in previous years, the way it was presented. I like the fact how you divide it into I just like it the way you did it. And I don't know whether that part of it was required. I'm not quite sure what the comment was, where it was required to be done this way, whether it was the number of presentations or the way it was presented or something else that I missed.
I think it was just about the pie chart.
Oh, the pie, that.
The
Okay,
pie chart,
okay.
that's all that was
Pie chart,
yes,
okay.
yes.
It was a
So I also appreciate the pie chart, and I think when people are able to see that visual, they understand how child-intensive education is. I think people forget, right, that we are, I hate to use the word in the business of, because it's really not a business, but this is what we do, right? Every little person, this all has an impact on every little person, and how, so for example, the class sizes, there may be a reason, I know for the research program, but there may be a reason that a teacher will say, having 5 kids in this class, this is important, and here's why it's important to have that, as opposed to a staffing issue where we've gone over 25 because we just don't have as many classrooms as we want or as many staff. So there may be reasons why the district does things the way it does that is important to also build into the budget explanation.
I think it's,
So,
in those cases though, I don't think anyone is, well, maybe some people are suggesting that that's necessarily a bad thing. I want to be clear, I'm not. It's more that we just have to acknowledge that what we're doing and why, and not just take it for granted.
yes, I understand, but there may be reasons from an instructional perspective why we're being asked to go below or above or whatever it is. So I appreciated the building blocks. I did. I thought it was a fresh perspective that was reasonable. It made sense. And that to me is the most important thing. Not to do it just because that's what but it made sense. To me, it was very logical, and I think the more logical and transparent and reasonable we can be to each other and as a community, I think I would hope that was a big part of why the budget passed, aside from the fact that I thought that it was a beautiful budget.
Thank you. I think great points. Dr. Hyde, you wanted to
Yeah,
say
just
something?
real quick. Wish I had a time machine. Let's pretend we went back 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And this is not a knock on anything, but the budget process and the way it was disseminated to the community was vastly different than the way it is right now. There is substantial, I will say, growth from where we were pre-COVID to where we are now. From the way we rolled it out to the number of meetings to the brochure, there's a lot to celebrate, but I think we can be more effective and more efficient as we move forward, and that's what we're trying to hone in on, maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 things that we can do a little bit differently. But I have to say, it was night and day, I believe, from where we were in the past to where we are now, and there's a lot to be proud of. And I think, again, there's a report card on all of this. It's 75 to 78% of the community thought so as well. So.
I would say the report card is A+. Now we gotta look for that extra credit. Like there's, I wanna be very clear, I think everyone was very happy and it was great, and we only, in that whole excellence, we just strive to be better. What can we just do better next year? Not that anything was bad.
Yes, continuous
And very,
It's always about growth.
exactly.
So you got a good Yelp review this year, so
Exactly.
good job on that.
78%, that's pretty good.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can pay them.
Exactly.
You want to hear my perspective?
Yes, we certainly do.
No.
So I too, with the administrators, I do think it's helpful to speak with them, and now they've been through the process too. So that was the one area I felt it was a little rushed for them.
Mhm.
I thought the feedback from the board, I appreciated all of it. I do think it's important for you to understand what the rollover budget is sooner, so that way you feel like you know what you're dealing with. So I really appreciate all of your perspective and your input. So
The administrators group, for sure,
Yes.
they will push.
So in light, and actually I asked this, I wrote it down, I didn't ask it, and since you brought it up. So are you going back to the administrators and asking for their feedback, just to get a perspective
We
from
will.
them? Because I'm happy to see how much they participated, and like you said, they grew, but I'd like to, a self-evaluation of all aspects and all selves is always helpful.
It's also the first year out, so
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's just gonna get better from here, you know.
So, we only have like 2 minutes and we have one community member. Mrs. Maloney, I'm actually gonna put you on the spot and you don't have to answer now, but you could possibly maybe send us an email if you're not comfortable now. But we'd love feedback from your view of how it went and how we can help you help us and what can be done, what you liked, what you didn't like.
Sure, so, first, on behalf of Parents Council, I would like to thank the administration for building such a student-focused, equitable budget to the board, for approving it. On a personal note, in the last 5 or so years that I've been really engaged, this was the first budget that really felt focused on growth, focused on opportunity, and I hope personally that the next budgets we see will be more focused, or can be focused on access to those opportunities. But it was really a wonderful budget, and I think the report card showed that, so thank you. In terms of the process, I would like to go back to Parents Council, to the HSA leadership, and sort of gather their feedback to be more comprehensive in what we give back to you. On a personal note, I did feel like this budget process connected most of the dots for the community between the budget and the vision, and that may have played into the success that we saw in terms of the margin. I think it's really important for community members to understand how what we're spending gets us to where we want to be. And I think what we saw was that a majority of our community really does support the vision and the direction that this district is headed. So I think anything we can do over the next year to connect those dots even more clearly for the community will be very helpful. I do think, these meetings and the curriculum meetings, they're wonderful, but I don't know how many people are watching on the live stream now, but I'm the only community member in here, so those are not the places to draw the lines and connect the dots for the community. It really has to happen in those big budget work sessions. And I agree that starting from the fixed costs is important. Taking out that, whatever it is, 76% of stuff you can't control, to really let the community understand what the number is that we're working with. What are we talking about here? Because I had interactions with community members about things like administration costs versus administrative costs, and to really understand that our central administration, our most highly paid, compensated administrators, that accounts for 2% of our budget, and people are saying it's 50%. It's the numbers that are going around, the misinformation is astonishing. So I think being very clear about what the numbers are, what we're working with, and what we're talking about from the get-go is really critical. So having the budget builders there to present their wish lists was wonderful. Again, I would love to talk to all of the HSA leadership and my co-president to understand more comprehensively what we can come back with.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So, anybody else have, we're literally at 10:31, so anybody else? Otherwise, I think we can adjourn and say, we'll see you next fall, maybe.
I just want to say, I think personally you did an amazing job as a budget chair.
I appreciate it.
This
Thank you.
was your
We got-
first year on
we
the
got-
board.
We got through it.
No, it was
Yeah.
great.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. And thank you, Mrs. O'Hara.
Can I just have more numbers for just a second? Ruth, you can stay for a few minutes, right? Okay, I'll talk to Ruth, Kathy, and then we'll get it all